They stopped him, insulted him, and tried to humiliate him because they thought he didn't belong. Just 7 minutes later, the truth left everyone speechless. Have you ever judged someone only to realize you couldn't have been more wrong? That's exactly what happened at an airport when a racist police officer stopped a black man, assuming he had no business being there. What started as blatant discrimination turned into one of the most shocking moments caught on camera. This isn't just a story about injustice, it's about a powerful message that forced everyone watching to rethink their assumptions. Stick around to see how one man's patience and dignity turned an ugly situation into an unforgettable lesson for the world. The scene begins at the bustling entrance of a major airport. Travelers from every walk of life move quickly through security, focused on their destinations. Among them is a well-dressed black man, walking confidently toward the check-in counter. His demeanor suggests self-assurance, but for one airport police officer, it's enough to draw unnecessary attention. The white officer, tall and imposing, steps into the man's path. Without offering a polite greeting, he abruptly demands to see the man's ID. Confused but composed, the man reaches for his wallet. Before he can even hand over his credentials, the officer cuts him off. "What business do you have here?" "This isn't some public bus stop," the officer sneers, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. A few people glance over, but no one intervenes. The man, calm and respectful, responds, "I'm here for a flight. Here's my ID if you'd like to check." The officer, clearly looking for a reason to escalate, grabs the ID and inspects it with exaggerated skepticism. "You expect me to believe this is real?" he says, holding the card up as if it's evidence of a crime. He chuckles, shaking his head, and tosses the ID back at the man. "Look, I don't know what kind of stunt you're pulling, but you're not fooling me. People like you don't just walk into airports like this." The insult hangs in the air, heavy and unmistakable. The black man, though clearly offended, maintains his composure. "People like me? What exactly do you mean by that?" he asks, his voice steady but sharp. The officer smirks, leaning in slightly as if to assert dominance. "You know exactly what I mean. Dressed up like that, acting like you belong. Let me guess, some kind of fake business meeting? Trying to impress someone?" By now, a small crowd has begun to form, their curiosity piqued by the confrontation. Some passengers whisper to one another, while others pull out their phones to record the interaction. Still, no one steps forward to challenge the officer's behavior. The black man takes a deep breath, clearly trying to suppress his frustration. "I don't owe you an explanation for why I'm here. I've done nothing wrong, and I'd appreciate it if you'd step aside so I can continue to my flight." But the officer isn't finished. He steps even closer, invading the man's personal space. "Not so fast. You think you can just walk away? Not until I'm satisfied you're not a threat." "So, what's in the bag?" he demands, pointing to the man's designer briefcase. The man pauses, glancing around at the growing audience. "It's personal belongings, nothing illegal. I'm happy to cooperate, but this is starting to feel like harassment." The officer scoffs, clearly enjoying the attention. "Harassment? That's rich. You know, people like you are always looking for an excuse to play the victim card. How about you stop wasting everyone's time and go back to wherever you came from?" The tension in the air is palpable. The black man, though clearly furious, refuses to lash out. Instead, he calmly says, "I don't think you know who you're talking to, officer. But I assure you, you'll regret this behavior." The officer laughs mockingly. "Oh, I'm shaking in my boots. Sure, let me guess, you're some big shot, right? Give me a break." The crowd continues to grow, and whispers turn into murmurs of disbelief. Some passengers look uncomfortable. Others pull out their phones to record. It's clear to everyone watching that the officer's actions are fueled by prejudice, but no one knows what's coming next. Unbeknownst to the officer, just minutes away on the runway, a private jet is making its final approach. It's about to turn this entire situation on its head. The black man, standing tall despite the escalating tension, looks the officer in the eye. His calm demeanor seems to unnerve the officer, who is clearly used to intimidating others. The murmurs from the growing crowd intensify as passengers begin recording the scene on their phones. While some watch in silent discomfort, others whisper their disapproval, but no one dares to intervene. The officer, visibly enjoying the attention, continues his line of questioning. "So, you're just going to stand there and act like you're too important to explain yourself? Who do you think you are?" The black man exhales deeply, as if holding back an ocean of emotions. "I've already told you, officer. I'm here for a flight, and I've provided my identification. Beyond that, I don't owe you any further explanation." "Identification?" the officer mocks, holding up the man's ID once more. "This, please, looks fake to me. Maybe we should run a check to see how many aliases you have." His tone drips with condescension, and his smirk grows wider as he tosses the ID back toward the man, who catches it effortlessly. By now, the situation has drawn the attention of airport staff. A young female attendant cautiously approaches the scene, clearly uneasy. "Officer, is there a problem here?" she asks, her voice trembling slightly. "Not unless he makes it one," the officer responds curtly, waving her off. "Just doing my job. You can go back to yours." But the black man notices her hesitation and meets her gaze. "It's fine," he says calmly, his voice carrying an air of quiet authority. "I'm sure this won't take much longer." The attendant hesitates but steps back, clearly uncomfortable with the officer's behavior. Just as the officer begins another round of belittling remarks, a distant sound draws the crowd's attention, a low, rumbling hum growing louder by the second. Heads turn toward the tarmac as a sleek, white private jet descends gracefully onto the runway, its polished exterior gleaming in the sunlight. The officer doesn't notice at first, too busy trying to maintain control of the situation. "You think you're special? You think you can just walk in here and act like you own the place?" he says, pointing an accusatory finger at the man. The black man glances toward the jet, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. He finally speaks, his voice calm, but with a quiet power that commands attention. "You're going to regret this, officer, and it won't take long." The officer scoffs, rolling his eyes. "Oh yeah? And why's that? Because you're someone important? Give me a break." Meanwhile, on the runway, the jet has come to a stop, and a small crew of ground staff begins preparing for its arrival. A luxury car pulls up to the edge of the tarmac, its driver stepping out to open the door. Back at the entrance, the crowd watches with bated breath as the pieces begin to fall into place. The black man checks his watch, his calmness only adding to the growing tension. He looks at the officer one last time and says, "You'll see soon enough." Moments later, a well-dressed airport manager approaches, flanked by two assistants. He appears flustered and hurried, glancing between the black man and the officer. Without hesitation, he addresses the black man with a tone of deep respect. "Mr. James, my sincerest apologies for the delay. Your jet is ready, and the crew is awaiting your arrival." The crowd gasps audibly. The officer's face goes pale, his confident smirk vanishing as realization dawns on him. "Wait, jet? What?" he stammers, looking between the manager and the man he had just insulted. The black man doesn't bother addressing the officer. Instead, He adjusts his tie, gives the manager a polite nod, and walks past the stunned crowd toward the awaiting luxury car. The officer, now visibly shaken, tries to explain himself to the manager. I didn't know he didn't say anything about. The manager cuts him off sharply. We'll be discussing your actions later. For now, I suggest you reflect on the way you've treated one of our most important clients. As the black man steps into the car and it drives off toward the jet, the crowd is left in stunned silence. Phones continue recording, ensuring that the world will soon hear about what just unfolded. As the luxury car pulls up to the private jet, the black man steps out with quiet confidence. The small crowd at the airport entrance, including the recording passengers, watches the scene unfold with astonishment. Every move is precise, deliberate, and dignified. His presence commands attention without him needing to say a word. The officer, standing frozen in disbelief, struggles to process what's happening. His smug expression has long disappeared, replaced by shock and a hint of fear. The manager, still glaring at the officer, walks briskly to escort the black man, addressing him with utmost respect. Mr. James, we've ensured everything is prepared for your flight. Again, I deeply apologize for this inconvenience, the manager says, bowing his head slightly as they approach the aircraft stairs. The officer, desperate to save face, stumbles forward. Wait, hold on a second. Is he really? His voice trembles as he looks from the manager to the black man. I didn't know. He didn't say. The black man stops in his tracks and turns slowly, his eyes locking onto the officer. The calm he had displayed all along remains, but now there's a sharpness in his gaze, a quiet but unmistakable authority. You didn't know? He says, his voice steady and firm. You didn't bother to ask. All you saw was the color of my skin, and that was enough for you to judge me. Enough for you to humiliate me in front of strangers. Enough for you to abuse your power. The officer opens his mouth to respond, but no words come out. He knows there's nothing he can say to undo the damage. The crowd, still recording, is completely silent, hanging on to every word. The black man takes a step closer, his voice now carrying a quiet intensity. You didn't just disrespect me, you disrespected yourself. Your uniform is supposed to stand for protection, fairness, and justice. But instead, you used it to insult, belittle, and discriminate. By now, the officer is visibly trembling, his face pale. The manager steps in, his voice cold and unforgiving. This behavior is not only unacceptable, it's a disgrace. Officer, you'll be facing immediate disciplinary action. Consider this your last day in uniform. The crowd collectively gasps at the harsh but well-deserved judgment. The officer, defeated, looks down at the ground, avoiding the piercing stares from the passengers and the cameras that have captured everything. The black man turns back toward the jet. As he places a foot on the stairs, he pauses and looks over his shoulder one last time. Next time, he says firmly, think twice before you judge someone based on their appearance. It's not just wrong, it's beneath you. With that, he ascends the stairs to the jet, where the staff greets him with professionalism and care. The door closes behind him, and within moments, the sleek aircraft begins to taxi down the runway. The crowd slowly disperses, but the incident lives on through the countless videos uploaded online. Within hours, the footage spreads like wildfire, sparking outrage and conversations around the world. People demand accountability not just for the officer involved, but for systemic issues that allow such behavior to persist. Meanwhile, the black man, now on his way to an important business meeting, reflects on the situation. He knew the encounter was about more than just him. It was about the countless others who face similar discrimination but don't have the privilege or platform to challenge it. In the days that follow, the airport releases a public apology, and the officer is formally terminated. The video inspires protests, discussions, and initiatives aimed at combating racial bias in law enforcement. But the most impactful outcome? The world is reminded that prejudice is not only harmful, it's also deeply unwise. The man's quiet dignity in the face of blatant discrimination becomes a symbol of strength and resilience. And for those who witnessed the event, one thing is clear. Appearances can be deceiving, and respect should never be conditional. The black man's quiet dignity exposed the officer's prejudice, turning humiliation into a global lesson on respect. The incident sparked outrage, led to the officer's termination, and inspired critical conversations about systemic racism. The private jet wasn't just a symbol of power, it was a reminder that appearances can deceive, but actions reveal true character. This story proves that strength and composure can challenge injustice and create lasting change. If this story moved you, hit subscribe for more eye-opening content, and don't miss what's coming next. Please note this is not a real story. It's a fictional story for education and entertainment purposes.